Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fit Chicks Chat. My name is Amanda Quinn, and on today's podcast, I'm excited because I have Michael O'Brien joining me today, who is the founder of Pause, Breathe, and Reflect. Hi, Michael. How are you?
Hey Amanda, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for having me
Yeah,
on.
you too. I'm so excited to have you here. I know your company is really focused on, I know you have two companies as we were talking about offline, but the one that I really wanted to kind of dive into today is definitely the one that is focused around mindfulness and around just breath work and really just taking a moment to kind of become aware, I believe, of like your surroundings and everything that is going on. Is that sort of the foundation of your company?
Absolutely. Like a good question to ask is, hey, are you breathing? Which
Yeah.
seems like of course I am. I'm living, but we're not necessarily breathing all that well, not in a way that we can. And a whole bunch of us are actually holding our breath as we do email, and we sort of forgotten about this great tool that we all have is our breath to help us do a lot of different things. So yeah, the question I always like to start off with is, are you breathing? And the answer is like, yeah, of course. And then we get into a good conversation about it.
It's so cool because it's actually something that I've talked to a few people about the whole idea around because I'm really into like breathwork. There's actually a course I was going to take and it's like this breathwork mastery program and stuff because I think it's so fundamental and so important but it's this thing that's like breathing is just something we do on a regular basis. It's like this subconscious kind of thing that your body is just doing, right? It just naturally just does it. We don't really think about it. But if you actually take a moment and you think about it and you think about your breath, you can realize that a lot of times you're doing really short, shallow breaths. Like you said, you're doing a lot of like holding your breath, or you're doing just like not, it's just like not proper breathing, which can then cause issues with like your cortisol, with your different, sorry, my brain is like going all over the place because I'm thinking about all these different things I want to say, but it's like, your focus, like everything is affected by how you breathe. And it's something, I try to even instill with my daughter where I'm like, I always talk about like how to take deep breaths and stuff, especially if she's feeling frustrated and all these things. So why is it that you think most people are not necessarily being like consciously aware of their breathing? And is it because it's just like a subconscious thing that we always do?
Yeah, it's like one of those automatic things that we don't, in some ways, thank goodness we don't have to think about it because we might forget. If it was a to-do on our
Yeah.
to-do list, it's like
That's
remember to
funny, yeah.
breathe today. So I think we can express a lot of gratitude to for the fact that we don't have to remember to breathe.
Right.
But in the same way, like with our health, it's so easy on these things that are automatic, like what our body does. And the body is like an amazing thing when you really like break it down and think about it. It's so easy to take all that stuff for granted, like
Hmm.
the work that you all do. It's so easy to take your health for granted. Like I'm healthy, other people get sick, not me. And then all of a sudden we lose our health because we stop paying attention to what can actually support our health. And
Hmm.
often we can forget about our breath until that moment where we really need it, or because we're not breathing properly
Hmm.
or consciously, then our body's like screaming out at us, like, hey, remember to breathe, remember to slow it down. And yeah, the breath can do a lot of different things. It can amp us up when we need a little bit more energy. It can calm us down when we need to chill. It also
Hmm.
can help us get focused when we need to focus on things and expand our awareness. But the big thing is, I like to think it sort of hits a sweet spot for us, like that zone of our great performance where we're not
Right.
like almost like a surfer on a wave. We're not leaning too far forward on the surfboard and we're not leaning too far back. We have the balance in the middle, that sweet spot to ride the waves that keep coming at us. That's a natural part of life.
Interesting. I like that analogy. Now, how did you get into like just backing it up for a second, Michael? Like, how did you get into breath work? Why was like, and your company called Pause, Breathe, Reflect. What does that represent for you? And how did you get into all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question because back in the day, I was not necessarily a guy into mindfulness or meditation or breath work. I actually thought like mindfulness is something that people who eat granola do. Like it's like I was a corporate executive and I didn't think any legitimate corporate executive would meditate because it seemed soft. And then I had something that I call my last bad day. I got hit head on riding my bike in New Mexico. I was out there for a company offsite meeting, and I've always been an avid cyclist since I came off of training wheels. So really into cycling. I brought my bike out to this meeting. Other guys brought their golf clubs. And then one morning, I was doing some laps around the hotel property, a 2 mile loop, and a Ford
Hmm.
Explorer crossed the center line and hit me head on going 40 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
And to make this long story short, doctors have no idea how I survived. That's what they told my wife. They said, hey, if your husband had been 10 years older or not healthy, he would have died before he got to the hospital. I broke
Wow.
a whole bunch of everything. I lacerated the femoral artery of my left leg. So I was a mess. And as I waited for the helicopter to take me to the trauma center, the EMT said, just try to breathe.
Hmm.
And so I knew enough about breathing as an athlete that, when the competition gets really tough, when the game's going way too fast, the coach would always say, slow down, take a breath, call a timeout, right? That's what a timeout is for. But
Right.
I never really practiced that as I became an adult. And so fast forward, I went to the, first surgery took 12 hours. I was in the ICU for several days. They painted this grim picture of my life going forward. They're like, you're probably going to walk with some challenges. You're probably not going to ride your bike again, given the
Oh
extent
my
of your
God.
injuries. And I was like, wow, like my whole identity felt like it got tipped upside down and it was like shaken violently. And I had no idea like who was I going to be, in this new
Hmm.
state. I was a new dad. We had two daughters, 3.5 years old, 7 months old. My wife and I had been married at the time 7 years. Come May, will be 30. So that's good. That's a good,
Congratulations.
yeah, yeah. So,
Yeah.
so in this period of like overwhelm, or relatively early in my recovery, I went back to what the EMTs told me. I went back to what my coaches told me to breathe, basically. Like when I feel overwhelmed, like let's just like slow it down. And in the hospital, I did my very first box breathing pattern.
I love box breathing.
Yeah. And
So
so
good.
I knew about that through like the US Navy SEAL team. And I just knew like, all right, I gotta slow the game down. I gotta get quiet. So I did this box breathing pattern for about 5 minutes. And then
Hmm.
fast forward, I started calling these my pause, breathe, reflect breaks because I thought I was being clever because I called them PBRs for short, which
Yeah.
here in the US, there's a brand of beer called PBR, Pabst Blue Ribbon. And so I thought I was being funny. People were like, aha, that's funny. And I was like, hey, it's a different type of PBR. But how I saw it was like I'm pausing, I'm coming back to my breath. And the reflect piece is key. That's a big difference in the practice I try to share with people. The reflect piece is that space where you can express gratitude for what you still have, what you can still do. It's a space where you can be intentional about how you're going to show up next, like what you're going to say or do. So, a lot of meditation practices, you'll sit on the cushion, you'll breathe, and then you're done. Boom, and you go
Yeah.
out. The reflect part of it is okay, how do you want to take this practice and weave it into your day, weave it into your life?
Hmm.
So it's not a transactional practice, it's a way of living. And I'm a big believer in doing micro practices multiple times throughout the day. And so
Hmm.
that's what I started to do. And it really helped fuel my recovery. When I went back to my corporate job, it helped fuel my climb to the executive, offices, this, C-suite, if you will. And I use, obviously I use it to this day. And in fact, I used it a lot as I rode my bike across the country, across the US in 2022. So I got back on the
Yeah.
bike, to say the least. But it's a practice it's a way of living, just to pause, come back to your breath, come back home, and just
Hmm.
spend a moment in reflection.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I mean, thank you for sharing that story. That was amazing. And I commend you for the ability to kind of take that moment during chaos and really be able to just be like, okay, I'm just going to reflect. I'm going to pause. I'm going to just take a moment and just really try to tune it in. And it's interesting because when I think back to even my own practices, when I first started getting into mindfulness and breath work, it was when I was going through a really hard time in my life of really high anxiety and PTSD and all of these things from my past that just bubbled up out of nowhere. And it was the first time, and it was described to me as my teacher told me, use this breath work and this meditation work in like think of it as like the ocean. And it's like the ocean is chaotic. Like if there's a hurricane happening, right? There's crazy waves and all these things, or there's all this stuff going on. But then if you go to the bottom of the ocean, it's calm. And there's this calm within, right? And so they were like, think about it like that. Like within yourself, you have the ability to have calm, even if it's chaos outside. And it just, when you were talking about that, I was like picturing in my mind, like, you being in the hospital and like all this stuff happening, and, they're coming in, they're doing blood work, they're doing tests, they're getting you into prep for surgeries and all these kinds of things. And it's like, I've got to find the calm within the storm. Did you feel like that was kind of like the connection for you? Is like just really realizing, like, because if you dive into the chaos, it just creates more chaos, right?
Absolutely. I love that analogy. And any scuba diver out there will also love it because as you go out
Yeah.
to dive, the water can be really choppy, but then you get like 10 feet, 15 feet below the water surface, and it's like, or the
Yeah.
quote that I love from one of my meditation teachers, he basically said, hey, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf, going back to that surfing
Yeah.
analogy. So the waves of stress in life will keep coming, but
Hmm.
we can learn how to ride those waves better. We can change our relationship to stress. Like stress will always be part of our lives. In some ways, stress or tension helps us grow. Like when we work out, like we're putting the body under some level of like healthy tension. So that's all
Hmm.
part of it. So how do we change our relationship with all that and find that space, that equanimity, as they say in the practice, where you can find harmony or balance or whatever word someone wants to use, but just that calmness. So then we can be really thoughtful about what we're about to do next, as opposed to being in a reaction mode.
Hmm. Yeah, no, and it's so powerful. It's so interesting because when you can learn how to sort of tap into that within yourself and find that space to be able to just take some deep breaths, do, you know what I mean? Like close your eye. I always find for me, I always close my eyes, I take some deep breaths and I really just try to tune it in. It can actually completely shift the way that the moment feels, the way that the day feels, the way that energy, like anything feels. It's funny, I was saying my daughter, I try to talk to her about breath work and stuff, but she's younger. And so one of my tricks with her is I always say, and this is for anyone listening too, if you have kids and you want them to take deep breaths, if I ask her to take a deep breath, she's like, no, if she's in a bad mood or something. So I always say, oh my gosh, do you smell that? And she's like, what? And then I'm like, take a deep breath, like, and smell. And she'll like smell the air. And then it's like actually like subconsciously giving her deep breaths without her having to do the action that I want her to do because she doesn't want to do it. So that's my little like trick for any moms or parents or anyone that's listening that
I love
just,
that.
yeah,
That's a great trick. And what happens there is that she ends up breathing through her nose because when you say,
correct.
hey, you smell anything, we
Yeah.
immediately think of our nose. So now we're nasal breathing, and that's a healthier way, as you know, Amanda, to breathe as opposed to
Hmm.
breathing through our mouth. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. My girls now are in their 20s, 23 and 26. And so they still, give me like I don't know dad, or like I'm not going to
Yeah.
meditate to you. You're my dad, like so but I always love to throw in some tricks even as they get a little bit older and they've come into adulthood. So thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think it's like a funny way of me getting her to do it. So it's because I just feel like it's just one of the most important practices that you can do. So would you mind sharing with our listeners, like you were talking about the box breathing, and that was the first thing you did. Would you mind just sharing a really quick sort of example of how somebody right now could use box breathing, how it works, and why it's so powerful? Because I actually feel like it's actually one of the most powerful tools that I have in my like, I know there's so many different like breathing techniques and stuff, but I find for me that one is really powerful because it's very simple to use. It's really effective. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing that, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the mindfulness side as well.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in like trying to find like a tool that works
Mm,
for you. I think sometimes we come up with like something like breath work, and everyone's looking for like that magic, like, well, no, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. And the that is more complicated than it needs to be. So
yeah.
people are
It's like
always
fitness and
searching.
nutrition. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
We
no,
make
we're
things
gonna be,
harder than they need to be.
yeah, no, we're gonna be edgier. We're gonna do like, and it's all on their part a way to get attention. But like the basics do us so good. And so with fitness and nutrition. So the breath work pattern called box breathing is a
Hmm.
simple one. So you would want to, you can do this lying down, you could do this seated
Hmm.
or standing. Those are the three most common postures in meditation. You can also do it walking, so we can add a fourth. And what I do is I like to start with like taking a few like grounding inhales and releasing exhales. So you breathe up fully through your nose and you just notice your lungs expanding and then that feeling of release as your breath releases as you blow it out. And then you can get into a couple minutes of this sequence where you'll breathe in for a count of 4 or 5. So it sort of goes like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you hold for 2, 3, 4, 5, and then breathe out 2, 3, 4, 5, and then hold again for a count of 5. And that creates from an image a little box. And you
Hmm.
just follow that box along. So your attention's going to the counting as opposed to maybe just the sensation of the breath. But you do that for, again, a couple minutes, and then maybe take a few deep inhales and releasing exhales, maybe 3 of those. And then in a matter of like 3 to 5 minutes, you have a wonderful practice that you can do anywhere and everywhere, whether you're driving or picking up the kids from school. You could be doing it at a meeting or during a
Hmm.
meeting, really like anywhere. And so it's such a great practice. It's one of my favorites. It's obviously it started pause, breathe, reflect. So I'm really partial to it, but that's how you would do it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think I agree. I love it because it's so simple, right? It's such an easy task and like you can do it anywhere. It's so like it's like incognito, like when you're doing breath work, like because you don't have to be doing it's not like you're doing like the fire breath or things like that where you're like really, doing quick exhales and inhales. Like this is just like it's just linear. Like it's very easy to do. So I love that part of it. Now, when you think about, because I know like breathwork and mindfulness, they go hand in hand for sure. They're very much similar. But I know that a lot of people feel like, okay, the breathwork thing, maybe that example, they can be like, okay, I can do that. But then when it comes to mindfulness or meditation work, they think, that's not for me. Like you said, maybe it just feels kind of too woo woo or whatever. Or they think I've tried it and I suck at it. Because I hear people say that all the time, like, I'm just not good at it. And I always say, you can't get good at anything until you practice. And it's not good or bad with meditation. It's very much just some days it's going to click, some days it's just not. That's at least my experience with it. What would you say to people listening that kind of feel that same way where they're like, I either find it boring, I fall asleep, I find it hard, my brain is like a monkey brain and jumps all over the place and I can't think straight. How do you kind of coach people through that?
Well, the first thing I would say is congratulations, you're officially human. Like,
Yeah.
like we have confirmed that. And yeah, breath work can be more mechanical because we're usually doing some type of counting with breath work.
Hmm.
And to your point, you could do the fire breath and it can get you amped up. When we slow things down for, say, a mindful meditation, that's when some of these things pop in. And so we practice mindfulness not to get better at mindfulness or meditation. We do it to get better at life.
Hmm.
So
Oh, I love
let's
that.
just let's just say you fall asleep when you practice meditation. You can, and so instead of doing it, say, lying down, you might wish to do it seated or standing,
Hmm.
or you can do a walking meditation. So if the problem is I fall asleep while I meditate, okay, that's normal. You're not alone. You can pick a different posture, and you can even do it with your eyes open.
Hmm.
And so this way you're not training your body to fall asleep as
Fall
you
asleep.
practice. I will also probably add, I would want to talk to this person about their sleep hygiene and their sleep practices, because
Okay.
if each time they're taking a moment to slow it down, they fall asleep, their body's probably sharing with them, hey, we need a little bit more sleep, but that's for another podcast interview.
Michael,
So
I was sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say the exact same thing because it's like if you are falling asleep consistently, then you definitely need one. It's like whenever I was going through this period of time where I was really just working way too much and things like that, and I went to get my hair cut and I fell asleep. I couldn't even keep my eyes open just from sitting for too long in the chair. My eyes were open, and then I kept like falling asleep, and I was like, I definitely need sleep, right? Like it's a very clear indicator. If you're
uh,
doing activities that are calming and they make you pass out, it's probably a good indicator that you maybe want to maybe up the ante, go to bed a little half an hour earlier tonight.
Absolutely. I do believe the body will whisper to us before it really starts to scream or yell at us.
True.
Now, the whole notion around, well, my mind wanders or I have a monkey mind. Well, the folks at Harvard did a study and it showed that the mind wanders about 47% of the time. So even the most like guru monkish meditators out there, their mind will wander to like what
Right.
happened in seventh grade, or why does Becky have such great hair, or whatever, right? So we think of like all these different things that pop into our head. So the act of, hey, I'm focused in on, say, my breath, and then all of a sudden something random pops into our head, that act of noticing and then coming back to the breath, that's the practice.
Yeah.
Because that stuff is happening as we're doing our work or having conversations with folks. It's happening in just normal day life. Our mind is really busy and quite active. So the notion of awareness, like what's happening up there, and then coming back to that focal point. It's almost like doing a bicep curl, right? So the the arm goes out, onto a random thing, and then we bring the dumbbell back, we flex the arm, we come back to the breath. That's a rep, and that's the practice of mindfulness. So we can get better at it at times, but some days, as you mentioned, we're really good, and some days not so much.
Yeah.
But it gives us this idea of like, okay, what's happening in the body, what's happening in our mind, what may be present in our heart. And so you can do this practice in a lot of different ways. So mindfulness and meditation is a sitting, standing, walking, lying down practice. But we can also bring mindfulness to eating. Like, how aware are we of the choices that we're making? So we slow things down just a little bit. We give that period of reflection so then we can be wiser about how we're eating. We
Hmm.
spend so much time like preparing delicious food. We buy organic or we go to the farmer's market. We spend all this time to bring good food into our house, and then we wolf it down like in 10 minutes and we never taste anything. We don't get the nutrition from it. So we can also practice mindfulness through our eating as well. So, and I think the final thing I would say is that is as you try to develop a practice, start small. So many people, I'm not sure if you guys come in contact with this, but like from a workout, well, I got to work out for 60 minutes or it's not a full workout. Or
Yeah.
people think, well, I have to practice meditation for 20 minutes or it doesn't count.
Hmm.
My feeling is do it for a minute. Like do it for 1 minute each day until you get the hang of it. And then maybe you do it for 2 minutes, or maybe you add a few times throughout the day. So start small, add in baby steps. That's how I started. And then you do that consistently with some frequency over time. And then fast forward 3 months and you look back and you're a meditator. And that's really cool. And then you've put a new tool in your toolbox that can help support your overall health because you're breathing better. If you're breathing better, you're probably more thoughtful about what you eat, mindful eating, and you're also probably moving your body in a better way because your breath can really support your movement.
Definitely. I love that. And I was going to say too, with time, one of the things that I like to coach people on is the idea if they're starting out, it's in this, it's like with fitness coaches, nutrition, anything, any kind of new practice that you're putting into your body or that you're putting into your routine. There's two things. One, meet yourself where you're at. Meet your clients where they're at, but meet yourself where you're at too, right? So, like you said, if this is a brand new practice to you, don't feel like you have to go 20 minutes in. I mean, even the whole thing with working out for 60 minutes, that's just like an old school mentality because gyms pay their trainers per hour. So they're just like they're trying to get the amount of work in that they're paying for. It's really I actually believe it all just goes down to that. It's not necessarily about the actual time of workout because my workouts are usually about 30 to 40 minutes absolute max. So but then also from a time perspective, I found one of the most helpful things for me when I was doing my practice and when I started learning my practice, excuse me, was instead of having like a set time, like, oh, I have to meditate for 7 minutes or for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, is I would just have a timer set for like, say, 30 minutes. If I was like, okay, all I have max is 30 minutes, but then I would sit and I would just meditate and like maybe it would be 2 minutes. And then I was like, this just isn't vibing today. And then I would just be finished with it. I'd only set a timer if I knew I had like an end time I had to finish, but I never wanted to have like a set time frame because what I found was my brain would be thinking, like, has it been that long? Or I'd be like peeking when I open to like look at the clock to be like, has it been 2 minutes? Has it been 5 minutes? And then you're not necessarily in the space of actual like really tuning it in. You're kind of still like half in, half out. So by just having like no real set parameter, it allowed for me to just kind of like flow with what was ever making sense for me at the time. Does that make sense to you?
Totally. I think that's another good like tip because I've been there too. Like you set your timer and you're like, I think it's time. Like, I don't know. And then you peak, and then all of a sudden you're not in the moment.
You
You're
pull yourself
now in
out
a
of it. Yeah.
you're in a different moment. So when I created that app, getting back to your point, like meet people where
Yeah.
they're at. So many people came to me and said, "Hey, Michael, I under intellectually I get that I should practice mindfulness. I might have some things that have hung me up, like I don't think I'm doing it right and all that jazz. So we address that. But they go on to say, I don't have 10 minutes in the morning. Like my mornings are crazy and our morning routines have sort of gotten a little bit nuts, because we seem to
Hmm.
be throwing everything in the kitchen sink into our mornings. And what I've
The 20-step method of the morning
yeah,
routine.
absolutely.
I do like two things.
Yeah, it's just like, there's, if you can do that many things consistently over time, good on you. But for a lot of folks, it's just, if we can do one or two things, three things, we're cooking with hot oil. And so
Yeah.
my feeling is that, okay, so you don't have 10 minutes in the morning. I bet you have 5 times throughout the day where you have 2 minutes. And
Yeah.
we can steal like these little 2 minutes in between meetings or what have you, or even when we go to the restroom, we can just slow it down, have a few deep inhales, slow releasing
Hmm.
exhales. And so as I developed the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app, we built that in mind. We really wanted to meet people who might be new to this practice
Hmm.
to say, hey, you can do this anywhere, short practices. We have longer practices too. We have practices that go up to 45 minutes. But I really wanted to make mindfulness accessible to people because I think it can get a little too out there. And when it gets way out there, which speaks to a lot of people, which is really cool, but it can be sort of off-putting to a lot of others because it's
Yeah.
like I don't know, they're talking in this different language, and it seems like I don't want to become a Buddhist, and I I don't really
It
relate
can
to
feel
this.
daunting. Hmm.
I Yeah, I don't want it like a monk teaching me. It seems like a little bit yeah, it can be intimidating. And
Hmm.
so what I try to do is like, I'm going to make this really relatable, easy to fit into your life. And if you can slow it down just a bit and just have that moment where you're practicing a little bit more gratitude or a little bit more thoughtfulness, and you're changing your relationship with stress, then we get healthier and we start to connect with each other better.
I love that. And so for everybody listening, Michael has been generous and has offered to give you an extended free trial of this, the Pause, Breathe, Reflect app. So um, definitely check out the show notes. All of the links are in there. All of the details are in there. But Michael, can you also just, share with our listeners really quickly how they can get in touch with you if they have questions about your app, if they have questions about what you do, where they can reach out to you? Again, it's in the show notes for everyone, but definitely I just want to hear it from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Amanda, for having me on. I love what you all are doing. It's so important and it's so refreshing. So, and I
Thank you.
used this word earlier, relatable. So the link for the special offer will be in the show notes, as you mentioned. You can
Yes.
check out that app in the Apple App Store or Google Play. Folks can also go to pausebreathereflect.com and check out a little bit more of my story there. So besides the app, I go into companies and talk about change and mindfulness and just really help companies like understand this moment that we all share and how to navigate it with a little bit more calm and thoughtfulness. So people can go there and check it out. And also, once they download the app, they can join us for one of our live meditations that we do multiple times during the week.
I love that. I love that. So definitely check it out in the show notes, everyone. Michael, it was such a pleasure having you on. I would love to invite you back because I feel like we have so much more we could talk about. But definitely thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, thank you for listening and check out the show notes, check out the app, and I will see you again next week for Fit Chicks Chat.